probably going to be a big mess for quite a while.
Yep.
All right, I think we are live. Okay, yeah, got streaming to work. Figured it out. I think we don't necessarily have much today, right? I think it's just gonna be RC is still open until a week tomorrow, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think the main updates. It looks like we're already sort of 4 minutes in. The main updates from a lot of it is somebody new from the CNCF, or sorry, after Celeste left, somebody else reviewed the doc, had a lot less sort of comments, mostly sort of structural, not structural, more like grammar and a few word choice and some minor structural sorts of things to clean some stuff up. And then they also they had some comments on like certain word choice, like why are we using British English? And I'm like, look, that's a whole other thing I don't want to get involved in. But yeah, that's one of the big ones. The other big one was just to try and I think after some of the conversations I know we had is we just want to remove any remove any explicit reference to any tool from the doc, just because there's a lot of folks who are picking me for lots of different reasons, who are just like, hey, why did you say tool X but not tool Y? Why did you say tool Y but not tool Z? And that sort of thing. And I think based on some of the conversations, I've been saying what probably makes sense is to have something like a living document of just saying, hey, if you want to know, what tools probably maybe make sense and what the sort of current looking around this sort of thing is, here's where that doc is, so we can just kind of list all the tools, and then have a focus on the other way around of having folks sort of I would much rather a tool like, for example, the stuff that we're doing with the Secure Software Factory. I would much rather that tool references and says, hey, we are an implementation of this thing, than having the document say, hey, here's an implementation of the Secure Software Factory, because I don't want it to come off as, hey, this is the officially sponsored thing, right? And I want to, and the problem that's happening is a lot of people are starting to take it that way, and just rather not do that. And then obviously with folks who are just like, hey, look, I get it. Everybody has a startup. Everybody has something they're trying to sell, and I'd really rather not get into the business of, oh, hey, you put you're an open group and you sort of said, hey, we're endorsing this product that could make somebody rich, right? I really rather not get involved in that situation.
Yeah, and I think we have the cloud native security map for that, so we can channel all that energy to then just deal with it once, right? We've went through this wave of like we have this list of things where like, okay, how do we gauge a project? What are the priorities that we list a project and not list a project? So yeah, I agree on that. Let's keep the list somewhere just so that when we want to put it in, we have it handy.
I'm sorry, I put my hand up. Would it make sense to have like a radar or something like that for supply chain security products, right? I think that would be might be a better way to do it. I think that CNCF has some stuff like that, don't they? Where like like roadmaps and radars and stuff.
Yeah. I think I agree with you on that one. And having it be something like a radar, a living doc, that kind of thing, and make it clear, like the purpose is for sort of saying, here are products that we have evaluated, and this is the criteria we've evaluated them under, and then I think we have a lot more as long as there's reasoning and a lot of other stuff behind it, I think it's a lot easier to sort of defend, hey, here's why these things are listed and maybe other things are not. But today, I don't think we have that, reasonably in the reference architecture document, which is why I think we should probably remove it.
And then as far, well, if we are you removing tools or tools and specifications?
So specifications, I think we're leaving in there. So like, I think we're saying, I think the only specifications we're really even referencing at all is Spiffy in one place. And I think, we might be referencing Salsa in one place, stuff that is just very, very much like it is not, we're not talking about the tools. We're not talking about anything like that. And then in a few places, I think we are referring to stuff like, look at other best practices documents like the CNCF best practices documents, as well as things like, NIST and other sorts of standards. So I think we just have a couple of things where we sort of generically refer to other things, but we are trying to kind of like avoid, even stuff like in toto, I think we've mostly removed, trying to say, hey,
so I disagree with removing in toto. First of all, Salsa Providence is based on in toto, right? Also, there's several projects that implement in toto, right? In toto is if you go to Justin Cormack and you ask him what in toto is within the CNCF, his charter states that it is a specification project, right? It is not a project. They have some reference implementation, just like Spiffy Spire. But I think once we start talking about sanctioned specifications, right, especially since we are a CNCF group, we should be talking about in toto, where Salsa is a implementation of in toto, right? So is like the witness definitions that we have that, which is an open source project that we hopefully will be donating at some point, right? So I think I'd like to roll back a little bit on pulling in toto stuff out, especially since it has such a long lineage. It's well researched, well more than Salsa or any of these other things. And we've had a lot of members been working on a long time, and it solves this problem, right? The research is there, and a lot of people have been working on it for various organizations.
So on that, we actually have some guidance on the requirements for those kind of things. I think especially if, it isn't obviously like, I think for certain things like the NIST documents, I think those are kind of seen as understood to be kind of industry-wide resources. And then for standards, if there are things that are easily enumerable, where it's clearly defined, for example, like, an SBOM case and things like that, then we should just list all of them. If there is contention around it where it's not obvious, or these are still standards that are kind of like evolving, then I think, describing them and then following kind of like the guidelines that we have. Let me find it and then I'll share it in the Slack channel. But basically it goes something like, we are gonna say that this isn't the only thing, but we have an order of say, okay, we favor CNCF mentions of projects, followed by having particular requirements for projects such as, you need to have more than one maintainer, you need to have a certain lifespan. It isn't driven just the open source licensing is just driven by certain organization. And then, if you don't have all that, then it drops to, commercial products, if you really have to mention it. So I'll find that and I'll share it in the Slack channel. But I think as long as we have something to point to, it says, okay, this is how we derived it, and people are okay with the criteria, then I think we kind of reduce the contention there.
Yeah,
if I was to draw a line on, go ahead, Cole.
Nope, you go, man.
If I was going to draw a line there, I would say it's either draw it on specification versus implementation, or just pick a tier on the CNCF and say, hey, this is a CNCF project. We're coming out with the paper. So let's go ahead and say anything that makes it up to this tier, the CNCF, they're allowed in.
this is the guidance that we have for projects. And then we find that this is okay for standards, we can use it for standards. If not, we should define, this can be a separate exercise, right? We can define one for standards and just go with that.
Yeah, I like this. Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting like witness to be in this document at all, right? But I'm expecting that, the work on supply chain security that the In Total team has done goes into that, right? Salsa team is building off of that. Also, In Total does a lot more than Salsa does, including like the verification stuff. So if we're pulling that out, right, I think we're going to have a big gap in capability within this document. And that's my biggest concern.
So it sounds like is that contention on multiple things, or is it just kind of around attestation?
No, I think I was just using that as an example. I actually don't think there's any really main things around contention around that. I think there was some contention around, it turned out in one of the appendixes, it refers to Notary. And the SigStore folks were like, hey, why are you not including Notary as part of that thing? And going, oh, well, actually, we probably shouldn't have included either of those. Maybe Tough, because Tough, once again, is just a spec. Notary and SigStore are both sort of like, mechanisms that kind of do the signing and yada, yada. And I think, on that front, I think there was one thing there, and there might have been one or two other things that I think were sort of either OPA Gatekeeper versus Kyverno or something like that. And I think the idea was, to actually just sort of remove that and just sort of say admission controllers, as opposed to saying any specific admission controller. And I think, the same thing goes with, even though there's no point of contention at this moment regarding that reference implementation that my team had sort of built, given that it is being contributed, very specifically contributed to the OpenSSF in the next couple of weeks. And given that it is Apache licensed and everything else, there is worry that, hey, somebody goes and looks at it and goes, great, I would like to make a business out of this, right? And they start to, support that as, and in fact, a bunch of folks have sort of come out and said, hey, we would love to, a lot of companies that, GitHub actually opened up a couple of issues with us to say, hey, we would love to integrate with whatever this thing is going to become. And we really rather not get into the thing of like, hey, here's the OpenSSF that is sponsoring this thing that made these people rich or got sold as something else. I'd really rather not that got included in the document as well.
Yeah, I think the document should have requirements, right? These are the personas. These are the requirements for the persona. And then you have a second document that's more living and can be updated with a higher frequency that says, okay, these are the tools that implement it. And if you're a vendor and you meet these licensing requirements to put your tool on here, go ahead, make a PR and get it in there. I think that's a much more efficient way to do it than us trying to bike shed over what tools should go in a document. Because we're never going to make anybody happy, right? You deal with this stuff in in the business world enough, right? Let's keep it out of the open source and try to make it as efficient as possible. Let everyone play and use a pull request method to kind of get these things on and do an actual review of the criteria process per vendor that wants to get on there.
Totally agree.
Okay, so I have a little bit of a proposal then that, hey, let's once this project gets wrapped up, can we roll into doing some sort of a cloud native or doing some sort of a landscape for security tooling?
That exists. We had
But
Supply chain
I think
security
supply chain
Yeah,
and
yeah.
maybe an addendum to it focused on supply
Yeah.
chain.
Yeah. So I think that would be a good idea. And since we're on this topic, I think that post RSC, after we get through like cleaning up the paper, getting approvals, we may want to start discussing, what's next up for this group. What kind of work we wanna what do we want to work on next?
So sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh no, I was just saying that, I think that as we're wrapping out the reference architecture, this would be a good time for us to kind of like brainstorm again to see where we are, what do we feel like we got out of the reference architecture, and see what are like some of the next steps. And it could be talking about doing the landscape for the tooling. It could be focusing on a different part of the inputs of software factory, the outputs of software factory distribution. And I think this is probably a good time. We spent like almost 6 months writing a reference architecture. It'll be a good time for us to, with the bigger group, like brainstorm a little bit, and maybe also bring this to the regular group as well.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and I think I very much agree with sort of Cole there saying, hey, it would be great because I know one of the big things that's sort of come out of a lot of this is what is the state of things today, and like what tools do what today is kind of unclear because it's changing so quickly. So I almost feel like it's whatever. I mean, we could create a radar. It's probably going to be out of date by the time we build it, even if it takes us a week. It's like, hey, Witness added these 12 features, the secure software factory stuff, and we're changing the name of it, to be clear. But that sort of thing is going to probably add a bunch of new features. I know there's been some discussions on, we would love to integrate Witness into what we're doing with that sort of reference implementation. We'd love to sort of pull that in to show like, hey, here's how you kind of integrate Tekton chains plus Witness plus all these other things. But I think there's some interesting stuff on that front. In addition to that, I think, I know there's been, and you've probably seen this as well, Brendan, that there's been some folks in the OpenSSF that are starting to do stuff to, for example, salsify the open source world. But hey, great. Can we start to do the same sort of thing with what we're doing, with what we're doing with the CNCF? Is there areas where we can contribute to that? Is there areas that we can collaborate? I think that's another big one. One of the other things that's sort of coming up is like, does it make sense for us to, let's say, take certain projects and try and salsify them, or somehow like integrate with the sort of greater supply chain security work, right? Because I know one of the things that we're doing with the SSF, which is temporary name, is actually looking at how we map SSDF and other NIST and other sorts of standard. How do we sort of map what we're doing to that? And how do we map, like the thing that I'm trying to do as well is how do we map what we're doing there as, hey, this is a reference implementation of this reference architecture, or sorry, not a reference implementation. It's an implementation of this reference architecture. Here's where we totally hit it. Here's where we think that maybe that doesn't make sense, yada, yada. And how do we map to that? How do we map to these other standards? Because I think the thing that is coming up quite quickly is people are asking how all of these things fit together. And in addition to that, especially with a few companies have reached out, and I can't talk about some of them, but a few companies have reached out who are very large enterprises, highly regulated, and they've all said, we need to abide by various rules. A lot of them are security, supply chain security rules. Some of them are literally the executive order. Some of them are other sorts of standards, right? And how does all of this sort of stuff fit together? And I think we need to also start to discuss how do we map, like what does that sort of thing look like? And I know that there's some discussions in the controls working group on similar things.
Yeah, so I think maybe a good idea is it's February 24th. Maybe about 2 weeks from now, because next week we'll kind of be looking at the RFC comments and responding to them. 2 weeks from now, I think I'll try and grab a few folks from the controls group, bring them here. We can kind of have that brainstorming discussion on what are some things that we can work on, and then maybe we'll have a discussion from that to see what the interest is and see where we can move forward from there. On that part of salsification, there is some stuff that the Ghost team is working on with GitHub Actions. And I think the idea is that, we want to streamline the way that we can use GitHub Actions for repos to get Salsa 2, for example, right? Salsa 3 is a little bit difficult because we don't control the build. And hopefully to fund some work to see whether we can just like help certain projects get there, CNCF projects get there.
Yeah, on that front, with some of the stuff with the SSF that's being contributed to the Open SSF, and hopefully in the next week we'll have an actual better name for it. Probably something salsa or guacamole related or spicy, something like that. But that is all the one of the things that we want to also do as part of the open source piece is we would love to, like, according to some various things, GitHub Actions cannot do Salsa 3 based on the way some stuff is set up today. And there's probably some work that GitHub can probably do. But there is some stuff around, hey, we might have actual infrastructure that we could run builds of open source projects, Linux Foundation projects, that sort of thing. And we can probably say, hey, look, we can pull in Linux Foundation projects that want to become, Salsa, Salsa level 3 and Salsa level 4 into this sort of thing. And to be clear, I'm just kind of nothing's been set in stone, but there have been some discussions around, hey, could we deploy this thing that is that hopefully soon, once the Spiffy Spire stuff is all integrated and everything else, that, hey, it's a thing that sort of dog foods, the reference architecture, dog foods the Salsa stuff itself, so that like it itself is built with that level of security. And then, hey, can we then go in and then start to pull in these other open source projects and start to build them that way as well? And then we can say, hey, look, here is, I don't know, like here is I don't know, Keyverno, and here is Gatekeeper built with all of the all of these tools in following all the best practices, all the standards, and so on. So that's something that we've discussed a little bit, but nothing's there yet. And I know also there's the project Alpha and Omega or whatever, which is trying to sort of just generally secure open source coming out of the OpenSSF as well.
Yeah, I think we have we don't have lack of problems to work on. Seems like.
Yeah, I think on that end, I would want to talk with the larger group. I want to talk with the larger group on stuff like what do people think we should be working on, and like also talking with like, hey, look, the OpenSSF is working on stuff. There's inevitably other groups who are working on similar things, and there's going to be areas where we overlap, but I want to make sure that where we can, I would much rather collaborate and focus our stuff on maybe, stuff that is specific to CNCF.
Yeah, we could definitely, I think it would be helpful as well. I know we didn't do this for the initial supply chain paper, but maybe we should once the reference architecture paper is out, maybe you should do a survey, get Linux Foundation to do a survey on those 2 documents and get public feedback on, what are people looking for, what other things that we can provide, what are some of the areas that people want to focus on. Mike, are you talking? Okay. Okay.
Sorry. No, I'm not talking.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to kind of like discuss this too much because I think we all agree that we had to have this discussion with the larger group. So I guess, is there anything else that we have to chat about or we want to chat about? Okay. If not,
I might have a demo for next week. I'll throw it on the schedule if we have it ready, but witness integration with some GitLab stuff. So it should be exciting.
Cool. And Cole,
actually,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to go off tangent.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, and Cole, sometime in the next week or so, if you have some time, I'd love to kind of chat with you about some of the open source witness stuff and how we can maybe include some of that in an example build that we're doing, showing like, hey, here is witness wrapping this, and then here is chains coming in, showing these other pieces, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, we should be able to verify salsa attestations. We haven't tried yet, but it should just work. So I think if we can do a little bit of work there over the next couple of weeks and kind of prove that out, it may be seamless, and that would be really awesome, right? I think that'd be best case scenario, but definitely probably a little bit of work and some testing to get to that point to understand what we need to do.
Cool.
I had a question for Cole actually. So we've been working on the SPI stuff in Tecton pipelines, and I think what we're doing now is kind of just like verification by the controller, so kind of like just infrastructure protection. I saw on the witness repo that you're using ITE 7. Are you using that for the SVITs as well, or I'm just kind of curious because.
Yeah, actually, we just Mikhail just finished up the PR, I think, last night. That adds full certificate constraint support to the policy document. So we're working on merging that in and figuring out what we need to. I think it might be breaking, so we got to figure out the release on it. But that should be in there by the end of the week or Monday in the release. We should have a release with that in there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll take a look at the PR. Wasn't sure whether we wanted chains to include that attestation as well. Although I think based on the current TEP, there isn't a requirement to do that. Cool. Shall we call it?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Hey, great time as always.
Yeah.
Later.